Yokohama, 1946. Winter gripped the war-torn city with an icy fist. Buildings lay in rubble, skeletal remains of a conflict that had reshaped the landscape and the lives of its inhabitants. The wind howled through shattered windows and across vacant lots, carrying with it the sting of snow and the faint scent of smoke, a constant reminder of the recent devastation. Food was scarce, fuel even more so. Families huddled together, sharing meager rations and desperate for warmth against the unforgiving cold. Survival was a daily struggle, a relentless battle against the elements and the lingering shadows of war. Yokohama was a city scarred, both physically and emotionally. The once vibrant port, a gateway to the world, now lay in ruins. Hope seemed a distant memory, buried beneath the debris and the weight of loss. Yet, amidst the despair, flickers of resilience emerged. People worked tirelessly to clear the rubble, to rebuild their homes, their lives. The spirit of the city, though battered, refused to be extinguished. Makeshift markets sprung up, offering what little goods were available. Schools reopened, their classrooms filled with children eager to learn, eager to reclaim a sense of normalcy. The process was slow, agonizingly so, but it was progress nonetheless. The arrival of the U.S. occupation forces brought a mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, that the fighting had ceased. But also apprehension, fear of the unknown. These were the victors, and the vanquished waited, uncertain of their fate. Rumors circulated, fueled by anxiety and misinformation. Would they be treated fairly? Would they be allowed to rebuild their lives in peace? The future hung heavy with uncertainty, a blank canvas upon which the occupation forces would paint their vision. Among the ranks of the occupation force was Corporal James Lewis, a young African-American soldier from Alabama. He had joined the army seeking a purpose, a chance to escape the stifling confines of poverty and racial discrimination. He believed in the ideals of freedom and equality, the very ideals he was fighting for, even though those ideals were not fully extended to him in his own country. Arriving in Japan, he was struck by the devastation, the sheer scale of destruction. He felt a pang of sympathy for the Japanese people, even though they had been the enemy. He also felt a deep sense of unease, a conflict between his duty as a soldier and his empathy as a human being. The irony of a black man, denied basic rights at home, being tasked with bringing democracy to a foreign land was not lost on him. One cold morning, a convoy of U.S. Army trucks rumbled into Yokohama. They were laden with blankets, food, and medical supplies. The news spread quickly, carried on the wind like whispers of hope. People emerged from their damaged homes, their faces etched with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. They watched as the soldiers began to unload the trucks, their movements efficient and organized. Initially, the reactions were hesitant, reserved. Years of war and propaganda had instilled a deep distrust of the enemy. They kept their distance, observing from afar, unsure of what to expect. Corporal Lewis, assigned to distribute blankets, approached the crowd with a gentle smile. He spoke no Japanese, but his eyes conveyed kindness and sincerity. He held out a blanket to a young girl, her face pale and gaunt. She hesitated, clutching her mother's hand. Lewis knelt down, his gaze level with hers, and gently placed the blanket around her shoulders. He ruffled her hair, offering a warm, reassuring smile. The girl looked up at him, her eyes widening with surprise, then a flicker of gratitude. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. The scene was a stark contrast to the realities of racial segregation back in the United States. Here he was, a black man, offering aid and comfort to people who had been demonized as enemies. He wrestled with the hypocrisy of it all. Was he a liberator or an occupier? A symbol of hope or a reminder of defeat? He looked into the eyes of the Japanese people, searching for answers, searching for a connection that transcended the barriers of language and culture. A mother, her face etched with worry, cautiously approached Corporal Lewis. She bowed slightly, offering a hesitant smile. He returned the bow, a gesture of respect, and offered her a blanket. She accepted it with trembling hands, murmuring a word of thanks. Their eyes met, a brief moment of connection that transcended the years of war and animosity. It was a small step, but it was a start. a seed of hope had been planted in the frozen ground of Yokohama. If you found this story intriguing and want to learn more about the untold stories of humanity, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring these important narratives to light. Word of the American soldiers' arrival, and especially the kindness of the one they called the Kind Soldier, spread rapidly through the devastated city of Yokohama. Whispers turned into conversations, anxieties eased slightly, replaced by a cautious hope. The image of Corporal Lewis, a black man offering blankets to shivering children, became a powerful symbol. It was a visual testament to the possibility of compassion even in the aftermath of war. Driven by desperation and the allure of aid, more and more Japanese civilians began to gather near the distribution points. Initially, they kept a respectful distance, observing the proceedings with wary eyes. But as they witnessed the genuine efforts of the soldiers, the distribution of blankets and food, a subtle shift occurred. The atmosphere, once thick with suspicion, began to soften, tinged with a hesitant optimism. The lines grew longer, families huddling together against the biting wind, waiting patiently for their turn. The distribution process was not without its challenges. Communication proved to be a significant obstacle. The American soldiers spoke little to no Japanese, and few of the Japanese civilians spoke English. This language barrier created difficulties in coordinating the aid efforts and ensuring that supplies reached those who needed them most. Frustration mounted on both sides as simple requests became complex negotiations, often lost in translation. Cultural misunderstandings further complicated matters. Gestures that were considered polite in one culture could be interpreted as offensive in another. Navigating these cultural nuances required patience, sensitivity, and a willingness to learn. Recognizing the need to bridge the cultural gap, Corporal Lewis took it upon himself to learn basic Japanese phrases. He spent his evenings poring over a tattered phrasebook, diligently practicing common greetings and expressions of gratitude. He enlisted the help of a young Japanese boy, who eagerly assisted him with pronunciation and cultural nuances. With each new phrase he learned, Corporal Lewis felt a stronger connection to the people he was trying to help. His efforts did not go unnoticed. The Japanese civilians were touched by his dedication, his willingness to learn their language and understand their culture. It was a sign of respect, a gesture of genuine goodwill that fostered trust and strengthened the bonds between them. The other soldiers had varying perspectives on the situation. Some, both black and white, were supportive of Corporal Lewis's actions, admiring his compassion and dedication. They saw the aid efforts as a way to rebuild trust and foster reconciliation. Others, however, remained skeptical. Some of the white soldiers harbored racist attitudes, resenting Corporal Lewis's efforts to connect with the Japanese. They viewed the Japanese as the enemy and saw no reason to offer them assistance. Some of the black soldiers, while understanding Corporal Lewis's motivations, questioned whether their efforts were truly making a difference. They wondered if they were simply being used as pawns in a larger political game, their kindness exploited to soften the image of the occupation. Corporal Lewis remembered a time back in Alabama when he was denied service at a diner because of his skin color. The memory stung, a reminder of the injustice he faced at home. Here he was, thousands of miles away, offering aid to a former enemy, while still being treated as a second-class citizen in his own country. The hypocrisy was almost unbearable. One afternoon, an elderly Japanese woman approached Corporal Lewis, her face etched with the lines of hardship and resilience. She spoke no English, but she began to tell him a story in Japanese, her voice soft and melodic. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the emotion. He saw the pain in her eyes, the weight of loss, the enduring strength of the human spirit. He listened patiently, offering a comforting smile. When she finished, she bowed deeply, her eyes filled with gratitude. In that moment, despite the language barrier, a deep understanding passed between them, a shared recognition of the universal human experience of suffering and resilience. Corporal Lewis realized that it wasn't just about distributing blankets and food. It was about offering hope, showing compassion, and building bridges of understanding. His small acts of kindness were having a profound impact on the lives of the people of Yokohama, fostering trust and nurturing a sense of shared humanity in the midst of devastation. He was making a difference, one blanket, one smile, one kind word at a time. As winter deepened its hold on Yokohama, the already harsh conditions intensified, plunging the city into an even greater state of suffering. The wind howled with renewed ferocity, whipping snow into blinding flurries and driving the temperature down to bone-chilling levels. Makeshift homes offered little protection from the elements, and the shortage of fuel made it nearly impossible to stay warm. Food supplies dwindled further, and hunger gnawed relentlessly at the bellies of the already weakened population. The need for aid became increasingly urgent, a desperate plea echoing through the snow-covered streets. The logistical challenges of distributing aid, already formidable, continued to mount. The limited supplies were simply not enough to meet the overwhelming demand. Reaching everyone in need proved to be a Herculean task. The damaged infrastructure made transportation difficult, and the sheer number of people scattered throughout the city complicated the distribution efforts. Lines grew longer and longer, stretching for blocks, as families waited for hours in the freezing cold, hoping for a meager share of the dwindling resources. Frustration and desperation began to simmer beneath the surface, threatening to erupt into chaos. Corporal Lewis found himself increasingly wrestling with internal doubts and frustrations. He questioned whether his efforts were truly making a difference in the face of such overwhelming need. He saw the suffering all around him, the hunger in the eyes of the children, the despair etched on the faces of the adults. He felt a growing sense of inadequacy, a nagging feeling that he was simply applying a band-aid to a gaping wound. Was he truly helping, or was he just delaying the inevitable? The weight of responsibility bore down on him, threatening to crush his spirit. Adding to the challenges, a more overt form of resistance began to emerge. A Japanese man, a former soldier named Kenji, began actively working to undermine the American aid efforts. Kenji, who had lost his family in the war, harbored a deep-seated resentment towards the Americans, viewing them as invaders and occupiers. He saw the aid as a form of manipulation, a way for the Americans to control and subjugate the Japanese people. He began spreading rumors and inciting resentment, urging people to reject the American assistance and embrace self-reliance. Negative rumors and propaganda began to circulate throughout Yokohama, fueled by Kenji's rhetoric and the lingering distrust of the occupation forces. Whispers of poisoned food and contaminated blankets spread like wildfire, sowing seeds of fear and suspicion. The rumors painted the Americans as duplicitous, offering aid with one hand while plotting to enslave the Japanese people with the other. The progress that Corporal Lewis and his fellow soldiers had made in building trust and fostering understanding was threatened by this wave of misinformation. The atmosphere of cautious optimism began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of unease and apprehension. Despite the mounting challenges and the growing opposition, Corporal Lewis remained steadfast in his commitment to helping the people of Yokohama. He refused to be discouraged by the negativity and the setbacks. He believed that even in the darkest of times, hope and compassion could prevail. He redoubled his efforts to build bridges and foster understanding, spending more time interacting with the Japanese civilians, listening to their concerns, and addressing their fears. In a bold and public act of defiance, Corporal Lewis confronted Kenji directly. He found him addressing a crowd of people in the marketplace, his voice filled with anger and resentment. Corporal Lewis stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. Speaking through a translator, he challenged Kenji's divisive rhetoric, reaffirming his belief in the common humanity of all people. He spoke of the importance of forgiveness, reconciliation, and working together to rebuild a better future. He acknowledged the pain and suffering that the war had caused, but he argued that hatred and resentment would only perpetuate the cycle of violence. Corporal Lewis's words hung in the air, a challenge to the prevailing narrative of distrust and animosity. His sincerity and conviction began to sway public opinion, weakening Kenji's grip on the crowd. Some of the people who had been listening to Kenji began to nod in agreement with Corporal Lewis, their faces reflecting a glimmer of hope. The impact of Corporal Lewis's actions began to shift the narrative, strengthening the resolve of those who believed in hope and reconciliation. The tide was turning, ever so slightly, but it was turning nonetheless. The seeds of kindness and compassion, once planted, were beginning to take root, even in the frozen ground of Yokohama. The ripples of Corporal Lewis's actions, his unwavering commitment to kindness, began to spread beyond the American efforts. The Japanese community itself started to exhibit acts of generosity and mutual support, a testament to the transformative power of empathy. Witnessing the soldiers' selflessness inspired them to look beyond their own hardships and extend a helping hand to their neighbors. Those who had a little to share offered food, shelter, or simply a comforting word to those who had less. Mutual aid networks sprung up organically within the community. Groups of neighbors pooled their resources, sharing whatever they could spare to ensure that everyone had at least something to eat and a warm place to sleep. Makeshift soup. Kitchens were established in bombed-out buildings, offering hot meals to the hungry and destitute. Volunteers worked tirelessly, preparing food, distributing supplies, and providing comfort to those who were suffering. The spirit of collaboration and community flourished, a beacon of hope in the face of adversity. The people of Yokohama discovered that even in their own state of need, they still had something to offer each other. Creative solutions emerged to overcome the persistent language barrier. The soldiers and the Japanese civilians began to rely on visual aids, drawing pictures, and using gestures to communicate. Simple tasks became shared learning experiences as they worked side by side, teaching each other new words and phrases. A growing number of people, both Americans and Japanese, began to learn basic phrases in each other's languages, eager to bridge the communication gap and foster deeper understanding. The exchange went beyond mere translation. It was an exchange of culture, a shared journey of discovery. Small cultural exchanges began to blossom, further strengthening the bonds between the American soldiers and the Japanese community. The Japanese shared their traditions and customs, inviting the soldiers to participate in tea ceremonies, calligraphy demonstrations, and traditional music performances. The soldiers, in turn, shared their own culture, teaching the Japanese about American music, sports, and holidays. They organized baseball games, sing-alongs, and Thanksgiving dinners, creating opportunities for interaction and cultural exchange. These exchanges, though small, were significant. They allowed the soldiers and the Japanese civilians to see each other as individuals, breaking down stereotypes and fostering a sense of shared humanity. However, Corporal Lewis's efforts did not go unnoticed by everyone. Some of his fellow soldiers, particularly those harboring racist sentiments, began to resent his growing connection with the Japanese. They questioned his loyalty, accusing him of fraternizing with the enemy. They made snide remarks and whispered insults, creating a hostile environment for him. They couldn't understand his empathy, his willingness to see the Japanese as human beings deserving of compassion. They saw only the enemy, the people who had attacked their country and killed their comrades. But amidst the prejudice, a glimmer of hope emerged. Some of the white soldiers, witnessing Corporal Lewis's unwavering dedication and the positive impact he was having on the community, began to question their own prejudices. They saw the genuine connections he was forging with the Japanese, the trust he was building, and the hope he was inspiring. They realized that the Japanese people were not the monolithic enemy they had been led to believe. They were individuals, just like them, with their own hopes, dreams, and fears. These soldiers began to stand up for Corporal Lewis, challenging the racist attitudes of their peers and defending his right to treat the Japanese with respect and compassion. A sense of solidarity began to grow, a recognition that fighting for justice and equality meant standing up for the rights of all people, regardless of their race or nationality. Music, a universal language, became a powerful tool for communication and connection. The soldiers brought guitars and harmonicas, playing American folk songs and blues tunes. The Japanese, in turn, shared their traditional music, playing koto and shamisen, their melodies haunting and beautiful. They sang together, their voices blending in a harmonious expression of shared humanity, transcending language barriers and cultural differences. The music filled the air, a soothing balm for the wounds of war, a reminder of the beauty and the power of human connection. A shared song became a symbol of hope, a testament to the possibility of reconciliation and a shared future. The children of Yokohama, more than anyone, bore the brunt of the war's devastation and the harsh winter's cruelty. Their small bodies, already weakened by malnutrition, were particularly vulnerable to the cold and disease. Many had lost their parents, their homes, their sense of security. The laughter that should have filled their days was replaced by a haunting silence, a reflection of the trauma they had endured. They wandered the streets, scavenging for scraps of food, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and resignation. Corporal Lewis, deeply moved by their plight, felt a profound connection to the children of Yokohama. He saw in their innocent faces a reflection of his own childhood struggles, the poverty and discrimination he had faced growing up in Alabama. He resolved to do everything he could to bring joy and laughter back into their lives, to offer them a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. He began organizing games and activities, teaching them American songs and dances, and sharing stories from his own life. He carved toys from scraps of wood, creating simple dolls and cars that brought smiles to their faces. He became a surrogate father figure, a source of comfort and stability in a world that had been shattered by war. Inspired by Corporal Lewis's dedication, the community rallied together to establish a makeshift school in a damaged building. Volunteers cleaned and repaired the space, transforming it into a safe and welcoming environment for the children. Teachers, many of whom had lost their own homes and loved ones, offered their services, providing the children with a chance to learn and heal. The school became a sanctuary, a place where the children could escape the harsh realities of their lives and focus on building a brighter future. They learned to read and write, to draw and paint, to sing and play. They rediscovered the joy of learning, the power of creativity, and the importance of community. One day, the children surprised Corporal Lewis with a special gift. They had secretly collected scraps of fabric and thread, and with the help of some of the older women in the community, they had created a beautiful quilt. Each square of the quilt was decorated with a unique design, a drawing, a message of gratitude. They presented the quilt to Corporal Lewis with tears in their eyes, their faces beaming with pride and affection. He was deeply touched by their gesture, his heart swelling with emotion. He wrapped the quilt around himself, feeling the warmth of their love and appreciation. It was a symbol of the bond they had forged, a testament to the power of human connection, and a reminder of the importance of kindness and compassion. The combined efforts of the American soldiers and the Japanese community had created a strong sense of shared purpose in Yokohama. They were united in their desire to rebuild their lives, to heal their wounds, and to create a better future for their children. They worked together, side by side, overcoming language barriers, cultural differences, and the lingering scars of war. They shared their hopes, their dreams, and their fears, forging bonds of friendship and understanding that transcended national boundaries. The spirit of community flourished, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of collaboration. However, the progress they had made was fragile, and the forces of hatred and division remained a threat. Kenji, fueled by his resentment and his desire to undermine the American efforts, escalated his actions. He began sabotaging supplies, poisoning food stores, and inciting violence against the American soldiers. He spread rumors that Corporal Lewis was exploiting the children, using them as propaganda tools to win over the Japanese population. His actions threatened to unravel the fragile peace that had been established, plunging Yokohama back into chaos and despair. One cold evening, as Corporal Lewis was walking the children home from school, they were ambushed by a group of Kenji's followers. The attackers threw rocks and bottles, shouting insults and threats. The children screamed in terror, clinging to Corporal Lewis for protection. He shielded them with his body, trying to keep them safe from the barrage of projectiles. The situation quickly escalated, becoming increasingly dangerous. Corporal Lewis knew that he had to get the children to safety, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. He made a desperate plea for peace, urging the attackers to stop the violence, but his words fell on deaf ears. As the violence escalated, members of the community were forced to choose sides. Some, swayed by Kenji's rhetoric and their own lingering resentment towards the Americans, joined the attack. Others, remembering the kindness and compassion they had received from Corporal Lewis and the American soldiers, stood up to defend them. The community was divided, torn between the forces of hatred and division and the forces of hope and reconciliation. The fate of Yokohama hung in the balance, dependent on the choices they made in that moment of crisis. The aftermath of the attack was grim. Several children were injured, some seriously, and the makeshift school was badly damaged. Windows were shattered, desks overturned, and the walls were stained with blood. The air hung heavy with the scent of smoke and fear. The once vibrant space was now a scene of chaos and despair, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace. The community, however, refused to be broken. Despite the shock and trauma, they rallied together to provide aid to the victims of the attack. Those who had medical skills tended to the injured, bandaging wounds and offering comfort. Others cleared the debris, salvaging what they could from the wreckage. They worked tirelessly through the night, driven by a shared determination to heal and rebuild. The resilience of the human spirit shone brightly in the face of adversity. Corporal Lewis, despite being injured himself, stepped up as a leader. He organized the rescue efforts, coordinating the volunteers and ensuring that everyone received the care they needed. He moved among the injured, offering words of encouragement and comfort, his presence a calming influence in the midst of the chaos. He helped carry the wounded to safety, his strong arms providing support and reassurance. He was a pillar of strength, a beacon of hope in the darkness. In the wake of the attack, the identity of the individual behind it was finally revealed. It was Kenji, the former soldier who had been spreading rumors and inciting violence against the American soldiers and the Japanese community members who supported them. The revelation sent shockwaves through Yokohama. Many had suspected him, but few had dared to believe that he was capable of such brutality. The community felt betrayed, their trust shattered by the actions of one of their own. Kenji's motivation stemmed from deep-seated resentment and a profound sense of loss. He had lost his entire family in the war, his home destroyed, his future stolen. He blamed the Americans for his suffering, viewing them as invaders who had brought only death and destruction to his country. He saw the aid efforts as a hollow gesture, a way for the Americans to ease their conscience while continuing to occupy and control Japan. He believed that the only way to reclaim his country's dignity was to resist the occupation, to drive the Americans out by any means necessary. Corporal Lewis now faced a profound moral dilemma. He had dedicated himself to peace and reconciliation, to building bridges of understanding between the American soldiers and the Japanese community. But now, he was confronted with the man who had orchestrated the attack on the children, the man who threatened to destroy everything he had worked so hard to achieve. Part of him yearned for revenge, for justice, for retribution. He wanted to see Kenji punished for his crimes, to make him pay for the pain and suffering he had caused. However, another part of him, the part that believed in the power of forgiveness and compassion, urged him to resist the temptation of violence. He knew that seeking revenge would only perpetuate the cycle of hatred and destruction. It would only create more victims, more suffering, more division. He had to find a way to stop Kenji without resorting to violence, to break the cycle of hatred and offer him a chance at redemption. Corporal Lewis made a difficult decision, one that challenged his own beliefs and values. He decided that he would not seek revenge. Instead, he would try to understand Kenji, to learn the reasons behind his hatred and resentment. He would offer him a chance to renounce violence, to embrace a path of peace and reconciliation. It was a risky decision, one that could potentially put him and the community in even greater danger. But he believed that it was the only way to truly heal the wounds of war and build a lasting peace in Yokohama. He knew that it would not be easy, but he was determined to try. The complexities of human nature forced him to confront his own sense of justice. The tension was palpable as Corporal Lewis finally stood face to face with Kenji. The confrontation took place in the ruined marketplace, the same space where Kenji had once rallied his followers with hateful rhetoric. Now, the area was deserted save for the two men, the silence broken only by the whistling wind. The air crackled with unspoken animosity, the weight of their opposing ideologies pressing down on them. Corporal Lewis, his voice calm but firm, addressed Kenji. He spoke of the pain and suffering that Kenji's actions had caused, not just to the American soldiers but to the Japanese community as well. He spoke of the injured children, the damaged school, the shattered trust. But he also spoke of understanding, of recognizing the deep-seated pain that fueled Kenji's hatred. He acknowledged Kenji's losses, the devastation he had experienced, and the anger that consumed him. Kenji, his face etched with bitterness, retorted with accusations. He condemned the American occupation, the destruction of his homeland, the loss of his family. He saw Corporal Lewis as a symbol of that oppression, a representative of the enemy who had stolen his life. He argued that peace and reconciliation were impossible, that the only solution was to drive the Americans out and reclaim Japan's sovereignty. His words were filled with venom, his eyes burning with a fiery rage. As the confrontation escalated, some of Kenji's remaining followers, who had been lurking in the shadows, began to waver. They had witnessed Corporal Lewis's unwavering kindness, his genuine concern for the Japanese people, his dedication to rebuilding their community. They had seen the positive impact he had had on the lives of the children, the hope he had inspired. They began to question their own beliefs, their loyalty to Kenji, and the path of hatred and violence they had been following. Doubts clouded their faces, their resolve crumbling under the weight of Corporal Lewis's unwavering compassion. A turning point arrived when Kenji, in a fit of rage, revealed his own vulnerability. He spoke of his loneliness, his despair, his inability to cope with the loss of his family. He confessed that his hatred was a shield, a way to protect himself from further pain. He admitted that he was afraid of being alone, afraid of facing the future without his loved ones. His words, raw and honest, exposed the wounded soul beneath the hardened exterior. The confession hung in the air, a stark reminder of the human cost of war and the universal need for connection and belonging. Corporal Lewis, recognizing Kenji's vulnerability, seized the opportunity. He offered an act of forgiveness, extending his hand in a gesture of peace. He told Kenji that he understood his pain, that he empathized with his loss, and that he was willing to help him heal. He challenged Kenji to renounce his hatred, to let go of his anger, and to embrace a path of reconciliation. He promised to stand by him, to support him, and to help him rebuild his life. The power of empathy filled the space between them, a tangible force that threatened to break down the barriers of animosity. Corporal Lewis's willingness to understand and forgive, his refusal to succumb to the temptation of revenge, challenged Kenji's core beliefs. It forced him to confront his own humanity, to acknowledge the suffering he had caused, and to consider the possibility of a different future. The weight of his hatred began to lessen, replaced by a glimmer of hope. Kenji stood frozen, grappling with his own conscience. He looked into Corporal Lewis's eyes, searching for any sign of deceit or malice. But he saw only sincerity, compassion, and a genuine desire to help. He realized that Corporal Lewis was not the enemy he had believed him to be. He was a human being, just like him, with his own struggles, his own hopes, and his own fears. The choices he had made, the consequences of his actions, weighed heavily on his soul. He began to question everything he had believed, everything he had fought for. The path before him was unclear, shrouded in uncertainty, but for the first time in a long time, he saw a glimmer of light. Kenji remained silent for what felt like an eternity, the weight of his choices pressing down on him. He looked from Corporal Lewis's outstretched hand to the faces of his remaining followers, their expressions a mixture of confusion and hope. He saw the pain he had inflicted, the damage he had wrought, and the emptiness that consumed him. The hatred that had driven him for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of shame and regret. Finally, with a visible tremor in his hand, Kenji reached out and grasped Corporal Lewis's. The gesture was hesitant, uncertain, but it was a start. A collective sigh of relief swept through the small crowd. The tension that had gripped Yokohama for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a fragile sense of hope. The conflict was not entirely resolved, but a crucial step had been taken, a bridge had been built across the chasm of hatred and resentment. As the winter began to thaw, so too did the hearts of the people of Yokohama. The ice that had gripped the city began to melt, revealing the resilience and the compassion that lay beneath. The rebuilding efforts accelerated, fueled by a renewed sense of community and shared purpose. Homes were repaired, businesses reopened, and the laughter of children filled the streets once more. The scars of war remained, but they were no longer symbols of despair. They were reminders of the strength and the courage of the human spirit, the ability to overcome even the most devastating circumstances. Corporal Lewis's legacy as a symbol of compassion, understanding, and reconciliation endured long after he left Yokohama. His kindness had touched countless lives, inspiring acts of generosity and fostering a sense of shared humanity. He had shown the people of Yokohama that even in the aftermath of war, hope was possible, that forgiveness was achievable, and that a better future could be built through understanding and collaboration. His story became a legend, passed down through generations, a reminder of the transformative power of one man's unwavering commitment to kindness. The future of Yokohama was bright. The people, forever changed by their experiences, were determined to build a city founded on peace, justice, and equality. They established schools that taught tolerance and understanding, community centers that fostered dialogue and collaboration, and memorials that honored the victims of war. They embraced diversity, welcoming people of all backgrounds and cultures, creating a vibrant and inclusive society. Yokohama became a beacon of hope, a testament to the possibility of reconciliation and a symbol of the enduring power of the human spirit. The day Corporal Lewis departed Yokohama was filled with emotion. The children, clinging to his legs, wept openly, their faces streaked with tears. They presented him with handmade gifts, drawings, and origami cranes, tokens of their love and appreciation. The adults, their eyes filled with gratitude, bowed deeply, expressing their heartfelt thanks. Kenji, standing at the back of the crowd, offered a silent nod of respect, a testament to the transformation he had undergone. Corporal Lewis, his heart overflowing with emotion, promised to never forget them. He knew that he was leaving a part of himself behind in Yokohama, a part that would forever be connected to the people he had come to love. As he sailed away, he looked back at the city, its skyline slowly fading into the distance. He carried with him the memories of the hardship and the suffering, but also the memories of the kindness, the compassion, and the resilience he had witnessed. He knew that he had made a difference, that he had helped to heal a wounded community and inspire hope in the face of despair. The experience had changed him profoundly, shaping his understanding of the world and reaffirming his belief in the power of human connection. The story of Corporal Lewis and the people of Yokohama is a testament to the enduring power of human connection and the ability to overcome even the most difficult circumstances through kindness and compassion. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can prevail, that forgiveness is possible, and that a better future can be built through understanding and collaboration. It is a story that deserves to be told and remembered, a story that can inspire us all to be better, to be kinder, and to be more compassionate. Share this story with others and consider how you can practice kindness and empathy in your own life. Join our community by subscribing for more untold stories of history and humanity that celebrate the best of the human spirit. Next time, we'll explore the surprising friendship between a German prisoner of war and an American family during World War II.